My mom taught me to sell at a spaza shop. She ran a hair salon. I pretty much learned entrepreneurship from my mom's.
Ngumntu ngabantu. That on your own, you can't really do it. You need the support of those around you.
You will have a network of people, a network of communities and a society that will make sure that you count.
Good evening and welcome to another episode of Saita Straight Talk. The Saita Straight Talk program is powered by Saita, the South African Informal Traders Alliance. In these discussions, we focus on issues that are relevant to the informal and the small business sector. Sometimes we celebrate and sometimes we tackle the difficult issues. But in every show, we address topics that will empower you and give your business a better chance at being successful. Saita is the movement that has at its core the well-being and the voice of every informal organization and small business in our country. It is therefore that the vision statement of Saita is to be the unifying body for the informal trading sector in South Africa through active advocacy, playing a leading role at being the catalyst for innovation and transformation, while ensuring equal opportunity and dignity is protected. Now, in previous episodes of Straight Talk, you would have heard the panelists talk about bridging the gap and assisting informal businesses to formality. Tonight, we are starting our conversations on a building block that has always been relevant to mostly the formal sector. However, this is a building block that is fundamental to the success of the informal sector also, but has, through its very definition, been placed out of the grasp of an entire sector, the informal sector. Our topic this evening is BBBEE Codes of good practice and how it affects the informal sector. And our panelists this evening, Brad Fisher, thank you for joining us, and good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Louise, and thank you very much for inviting me onto your show.
Tell us more about the company that you represent, Brad.
Okay, the company I represent is called Supplier Development Initiatives. It's essentially backed by FNB, and the objective of Supplier Development Initiatives is to focus on micro entrepreneurs, informal sector, micro traders, and get them up to a level that we can then entice corporate South Africa to use the services, so to use their services. So it's all good and well to have a situation like Santon with all the wealth and Alex with next to nothing. And it's all good and well to shout around to the businesses in Santon that you must support businesses in Alex. But the reality is when you go to these businesses in Santon, first of all, and try and convince them to invest in businesses in Alex, there's an issue which I'll get to. But even if they did invest in businesses in Alex, the problem is that's not good enough. It's no use I sit in Alex and I receive a R500,000 investment if I get no access to market. If FNB gives me...
Brad,
yes, Louise,
just a moment. I know you're passionate about this.
Okay.
I just
I'm
also
sorry.
would like to introduce our other panelists, if you don't mind.
I'm sorry.
We have David Fenter. Good evening, David.
Good evening, Louise. Good evening, Brad. Good evening, Bantla.
David, please just give us a little bit background of who you are and your role here this evening.
Good evening, listeners. My name is David Fenter. I'm the chairperson of Saita's Economic Development Forum. Thank you.
Thank you. And then our third panelist this evening is Bandla Mbeu. Bandla, it is your first session or part of the panel. Oh, there we've just lost him. I think he didn't want to say hello. Okay, David, before Brad continues, I want to ask you, like I said in my introduction, we've heard a lot about bridging the gap and moving from informal to formal. What does that mean for us in Saita?
Louise, in 2015, the International Labour Organization passed a recommendation 204. And R204 talks about the formalization of the informal economy. Now, there are different elements when one talks about the formalization. But I think just for tonight's discussion, seeing that we are talking, and we will be touching on issues such as preferential procurement, skills development and training, or let's say we'll be talking about certain elements that will be specific to SMMEs. So when one looks at the formalization of an informal business, one talks about an incubation process of moving this business from a non-registered state. So I'm trading in my personal capacity. I'm not registered, or mainly stated, SARS doesn't know that I'm there and that I'm actually trading. So when one moves a business from that particular informal state to a formal state, what is that process? But it's not just about registering a business. And this is why I'm so excited about tonight's conversation, because tonight we're talking about sustainability. And that is, how do we register a business or move it from informal to formal, but then maintain the business within the formal state and then grow that business even further. So when one looks at R204, we are now touching on elements that has never really been discussed. It's not even been highlighted or spoken about, in various corridors. And this is exactly what this particular platform of ours is about. This is what Saita is about. It's finding partners such as STI, companies that's out there that is really passionate about creating a change. And then they've also to see or to advise and to assist us in bringing about that sustainable change. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Bandla, are you able to hear me loud and clear now? No, it doesn't look like it. Brad, I'm going to put the next question to you. So given what David has just said, explain to me why and how important is it for big business to be supporting the informal sector?
Okay, so in my opinion, I think this is the biggest issue facing South Africa right now. And I'll tell you why I say that.
Yeah.
You've got a growing discrepancy between, take race out of it, between the rich and the poor. And it's not being addressed. We have a code that channels supposedly a lot of money from affluent business into the poorest of the poor, but it's not reaching the poorest of the poor. You've got people, you've got a wealth of entrepreneurship at the bottom end of South Africa that could be world class. South Africa has got naturally great entrepreneurs. And unless we can bring them into the mainstream, you're not going to have a country that gets anywhere near its full potential. You're not going to have the dream of South Africa that some of us still hold dear.
Brad, you're talking about a code. Just unpack that code for our viewers. What is this code you're referring to?
Okay, it's called the BBBEE Codes, standing for Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment. And the code has been improved, in my view, and this is a non-political show, so I'll just talk straight. In my view, the code was before, it was called BEE, Black Economic Empowerment, and it served as black enrichment, essentially. You had a few guys at the top getting extremely rich, and the person at the bottom end who ran a school tuck shop or a lift business to take kids to schools got nothing. And the richer got rich, and the money just didn't get down to the bottom. So they changed the codes to what's now known as broad-based Black Economic Empowerment, BBBEE. And it's better. It pushes money supposedly to a broader base of black beneficiaries. But that code, in my view, again, and there's quite a lot of people that will support my view, has got a long way to go, because unfortunately, the money is still not getting down to people that could do so well with it for our country, people that are part of Saita, people like Dave that's trying to uplift at grassroots level. You ask him how easy it is to access that BEE money, BBBEE money, and it's an uphill battle. The codes need to change. It'll take me too long to give you too much detail unless you want me to, but really the code doesn't favor the micro business. It doesn't do them any favors. It's too easy and they're fantastic companies. F&B, I'm all for them. They want to support the micro. And yet they have a 500 million Rand Vumela fund. You can go and have a look at it. It's a great fund, but it's supporting businesses that are doing 50 million turnover and down. That might be 51% black owned. And my argument is a lot of that, it's don't negate that. It's absolutely necessary. But if you took that 500 million and you just put half of it into micro businesses like Bundler might be incubating, and then you also force business, not force is the wrong word, encourage business to use the services of these micro, then you're talking about something, and that's where the codes have got to shift to.
Okay, thank you. Bundler, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I've sorted it out, and I know it's the problem. I've sorted the sound
Perfect.
out.
Thank you. Bundler, you haven't had an opportunity to introduce yourself, so I'm going to ask you to do that, and then I'm going to follow up that up with a question to you. So maybe you just want to introduce yourself, please?
Okay, my name is Mandla Mbeu. Mine as a profession is business engineering, which deals by and large with business processes. So I, in a nutshell, do the architecture of a business after having understood the vision of the business, having understanding of what the strategy per se of the business. But by and large, I would advise on the strategy given a needs analysis that would be done. What is the best way forward for the business to proceed? So I would establish what the business is at that point and then where it's going to. So that's basically what I do at Saita, is to bring that support in terms of our small business, but also in terms of us as an alliance, as Saita, and our business units.
So Brad just alluded to that big word called business incubator, and we're talking about the codes of good practice here. How do those two combine, and how relevant is that to the informal trader?
Today, nice enough, we had a session with David, as we do in our week-to-week Saita, and how to really get things moving. And one of the critical things we looked on leveraging was the application of the R204. But where we stand with that is to say, we don't want to duplicate the formal sector into the informal sector. However, we want to bring structure into the informal sector, so that by and large, the informal sector morphs into what it should be by having structure. So if I look at business incubator, a business incubator will then bring that focus and dial up where in those aspects of a trader or a small business who didn't have the privy to knowing how to dial up their business and make it more structured. So we then come in and incubate that. An incubator, in its simplistic form, the name that it uses lends itself from an incubator when a child is prematurely born. So there are certain aspects of a child or infant when born that were underdeveloped. And an incubator then makes provision to analyze what are the shortfalls of that person or that child, and then create a support and tools necessary to develop that child fully and then release them out of the incubator. The business is nonetheless the difference. So you would take your business and say, in which sector does this fall in? Is it agriculture? Is it wholesale and retail? Is it financial services? Where? What are the stakeholders that are involved in the space that this business finds itself? Which corporates are its main stakeholder grouping that it can leverage and benefit from? And then once you have an understanding of that, how do you help this business get the recognition it could, but also the partnership rather than sponsorship, the partnership with corporates to grow as a small business or a trader? So in a nutshell, I see an incubator, a space where we can bring a safe space, where we can bring our traders and assist them to grow, where they can find access after having been packaged to be able to access finance, not maybe in the conventional sense, but finance that's geared at the very traders or small business. So it's about finding the niche of support tools in finance, financial products, also in operation. How do you optimize and introduce innovation in the space of the trader and continuously improve that as you grow them into a space of bringing structure within the informal sector? So from in a nutshell, that kind of thing.
Thanks. Thank you, Bandla. So Brad, if I go back to what you said earlier about those levels of income that a business can generate and how easy it is for them to access the support from government, versus what Bandla is now saying about the incubator being that safe space for the baby to grow. Are you thus saying to me that gap is too big? That's the joy of live TV. Now you've got to unmute yourself, Brad.
If you heard what was going on here, you'd be pleased that I'm muted. So you're saying that to support what Bandla has said, is there the regulatory support to?
Yeah. I'm saying if the incubator is supposed to be the safe space for the baby to grow, and you are saying that the BBBEE codes are actually so far removed from this incubator. So how do we bring the two together? What needs to happen?
So to be fair to the revised codes, they do provide funding for incubators, and companies can get what is referred to as enterprise development points for putting money into incubation, which is a good thing. But the problem is if there's not a strong enough demand on companies on the procurement side to give some business to the businesses that are sitting in the incubator, then you can throw as much money as you like at a business that is positioned in Khayelitsha or Alex in an incubator setup. And even if they've got good skills and even if they've got good abilities, if you're not twisting the corporate's arm to actually give them a certain amount of business support, procurement, there's a part of the code called procurement, which is not really tying in well enough, then these people end up sitting in the incubator and don't really get out of the incubation environment. So the codes are by and large good, but there's some very, very fundamental changes that could be made that would quickly lend support to someone like Bandla, who's putting business incubators in place. And the first thing is there should be added bonuses, added points for corporates that support. The smaller you support, the more points. It's no use that you're putting money into businesses that are beyond an incubator, that are referred to in the codes as either EMEs, which are exempt micro enterprises, which have turnovers of 10 million rand, for goodness sake, or qualifying enterprises, which have turnovers of 50 million rand. There should be a hell of a lot of points that go into companies that support business incubation where those businesses aren't even at 100,000 rand turnover, first of all. And there should be bonus points for companies that take that fundamental leap in faith and give these incubated businesses an opportunity to do some work for that company. You can't just throw money at an incubation if you Vodacom and then have nothing further to do with it. You should be compelled, first of all, to support the incubators rather than some of these bigger funds that I was talking to you about, where a lot of the money goes. And secondly, you should be compelled to start using on a graduated basis, as long as they prove themselves, to start using the services of that incubated business. And that's where SDI comes in, Supply Development Initiatives. If you can take those incubated businesses and put them on platforms like Uber did, like Bolt, like Sweep South, they're called gig economy, services on demand platforms, then there's no excuse for the corporate. FNB 10 years ago would have had a good excuse not to use a taxi to fetch their Japanese guests at the airport. But today, what is the excuse not to use Uber Black or Bolt Elite to fetch their guest from the airport rather than throw money at Avis Rent-A-Car, which is an international company? Nothing. The platform is the bridge that can take incubation that Bundle is providing for, mold them into the different platforms, whether it's Uber Eats, whether it's there's a thing called Load It, which are people that do deliveries, whether it's wastepreneurs that are people that do waste recycling, and give the corporate the confidence that there is now a platform like a Bolt that's going to look after and ensure a standard and aggregation. There's enough of them to actually service our needs, that these people are rated, that the term you use, that there's a certain element of formalization. I think Bundler used it, or Dave, I forget, that we're formalizing, or it was actually you, Louise, that we're formalizing to a degree the informal sector, but you're not losing their entrepreneurial flair. Because my view is, someone at Load It who's in their own truck that's doing logistics. Load It is a platform like Uber, but it's for rubble removal and moving desks and things. I take Ron, who's one of the guys we supported. Ron will beat Imperial Logistics hands down. Why? F&B provided him with a truck that's good quality. He does it at a cheaper price. It's his business. He's totally motivated to give a 10 out of 10 service. It's his business. He's going to get rated. He wants to build relationships for him. Compared to an Imperial Logistics, which has got layers of infrastructure that you're paying for, you're really paying for the brand. The driver's getting screwed, sorry to use the language, and nobody scores. Imperial Logistics, the money goes out the country. As opposed to 50 Rons, you've got one Imperial Logistics with employees, and they can't actually take on more drivers anyway. So there's a way of harnessing what we've got as a country, which is the potential on the ground. South Africa has got fantastic entrepreneurs. I've been overseas. We're better than most of the countries. We are entrepreneurial. We just don't give our guys a chance. We want to throw money at them and say, but stay in, Alex. You're not our problem. We don't want to throw money at them and give them a proper shot to service corporates. And you can actually do it through platforms. There is a roadmap. But until corporates take that psychological leap, the problem is you can convince the CEO of FNB, Gordon Little, he's the CEO of FNB Finance. He wants to, keeps telling me, he wants to, there's so many terms for it. He wants to see the unseen economy. And President Ramaphosa talks about, he wants an inclusive growth. And they talk about building back better, or radical economic transformation, or economic freedom. It's all the same thing. Everyone wants to do it, but nobody's doing it. And the way you do it is you give these small people a chance by aggregating them onto tech platforms. So you've got to incubate them, and you've got to skill them up. But unless you give them the work, unless you give them the shot, they will always remain in the incubator environment or in Alex and not in the mainstream economy. And the sad part is we can actually achieve it as a nation, and we'll be more efficient, and these guys will outperform big business by and large, I promise you. You think about it, a Bolt driver, Uber driver, who would have let their kids been taken by a taxi 10 years ago? But now there are people that allow Bolt or Uber to take their kids, and they put all their trust. That's a highly vulnerable environment. Why would it be so difficult to get 1,000 kids in Alex or Kalisha that are very good at fixing phones, better than me and you? They'll work this thing out in 2 seconds, this IT problem we had. Why can't we put them all onto an app that when we had a problem like tonight to get the presentation on, we go onto the app, we call a kid that's nearby, they're into the Bolt or Uber, they're at my house, or they're online and they fix the problem and they made themselves 300 Rand. As opposed to now phoning, I don't know who I'd phone tonight. I mentioned data, someone will come in the morning, there'll be 1,500 Rand bill, and they probably won't be as motivated as the kid anyway. No reason. There are, as we speak, I bet you, 1,000 kids in Kalisha that could have solved our problem tonight was to put the presentation onto but they're never going to get a chance. And that's what STI is all about, to try and get these guys a shot at servicing the big, the main economy.
Thanks, Brad. David, so now I want to direct it to you, because Brad has now touched on a lot of touch points that are have already been birthed within the Saita EDF. So we cannot have this conversation when we say one sector, one voice. We cannot talk about the responsibility or not talk about the responsibility that Saita has as an alliance partner to make sure that all voices are heard with all these touch points that we have already available. So how do you see that working in the Saita environment where informal traders as a whole will benefit?
Brad has touched on a very important point, and I think we have to just take a few steps back. Let's go back a couple of years. The informal sector is a very fragmented sector. So when you're talking, let's say when the code was developed, or let's even talk about big business wanting to support informal traders, the question would be is where do we find traders? Where do we find traders in an incubation system? Where do we find traders with a specific skill set? It's such a broad sector. When big business appoints a supplier, the supplier is normally vetted on various certain facets before you just spend. So where's that data collated, and how do we then choose this particular vendor per se if we were to spend? So a few years back, it was extremely fragmented. But what Brad is pointing out, and correctly so, is that formalization has taken place in various platforms. Brad has mentioned platforms or within the technological space. There are apps, there are online directories that one could access, or there's certain companies such as SDI, which is currently there, where you can identify traders if you wanted to invest within the sector. There is Saita, South African Informal Traders Alliance, a federation that comprises of all the unions, or let's term it associations, with associations of traders across South Africa that make up this federation that is called Saita. So if any corporate wanted to invest or spend money in any one of the three SMME elements, be it preferential procurement, be it enterprise development, be it skills development, if they wanted to spend money, they could contact us, and we'd be able to work with them, and we'd have a team of professionals to be able to bring these two sectors together. So what we see as Saita is that there's such a heavy reliance on government. There's a heavy reliance on government to sort this problem out, right? But yet it's not just a government problem. Not that I'm releasing government from its obligations, but it's not just a government problem. What are we doing as business, big business, small business, micro enterprise, informal traders? What are we doing as well to facilitate and support each other? And that's why this conversation is so important, because together with government, and I think, again, it's the partnerships which we're talking about, but together with government, we could have a platform through which big business could join in creating this upstream where we start this recovery process, and rapidly so. Another key point which Brad mentioned. I mean, I'll make a very, very quick example. Just today, I had a conversation with an informal trader that manufactures shoes. High quality shoes, right? And we were talking about his business, and he says his business is struggling because he manufactures shoes, but he's got clients that's maybe 100 kilometers away that wants 2 pairs of shoes. It's not feasible for him to manufacture 2 pairs of shoes, then courier it 100 Ks. It's just not feasible. But what if a big business came about and ordered 300 pairs of shoes from that trader? Immediately, you've probably employed 5 people. You've just created 5 jobs, 5 or 6 jobs. And you've taken that small business and you've had a 500% improvement or increase in job creation. So when one looks at the BBBEE codes, it's not just about the empowerment of black business. If we say empowerment of black business, it's actually directing money into townships, into communities where black businesses reside. So when one talks about the codes, it's about creating employment within those environments and to direct money into those economies or those townships to uplift it. So there's a much bigger purpose than just supporting black business. So when one says if one can include informal traders and micro enterprises into that space, you're bringing so much black business into that particular space, and supporting the fact that they reside in townships, in those economies, And the minute they have to employ, they're not going to use recruitment agencies to outsource and source people. They can employ someone in the closest vicinity of where they are trading. So what we're talking about tonight is an accelerator. This could be an accelerator to the economic recovery of this country. It will just create jobs at a pace we have never seen before. So as Saita, we in total support of the conversation that is happening here tonight. And again, we know we can't do this by ourselves. And that's why we are open to partnerships. That's why discussions and partners such as SDR is very important to us.
Can I have a word on Dave's example with the shoes? Can I add on to David? Sorry,
Brad, we'll do it now. And which is why these partnerships are very important to us, to see how do we work together with companies such as SDI so that we can achieve these objectives together. Thank you.
Yeah. Brad, your turn.
Sorry, I didn't know where the hand is here.
No, there isn't a hand. It's your hand that I'm looking for.
Sorry. Dave, sorry to interrupt, but just on your example, I never thought of it before. It's not only necessarily business. If we could just get generally people to support small business. So, for example, that guy with the shoes, assuming he's good quality, he could set up a situation where they provided shoes to stores that service schools around the country. Do you know how much business must go to making school shoes around the country? And I don't know, but I would guess there's one or two big companies, big fat cats that have got the market sewn up. So if people were incentivized to rather let the school shoes, just that, be made by the local community for the local schools, and then what you just said, each person was employing 10 people, as opposed to that really big company just making more money. Half of them are owned offshore anyway, and the money leaving the country or not getting invested or paying out and a few people buying at the top stuff, as opposed to so many people at the bottom, this accelerator thing that Dave talked about. So I that's just such a good example with there's a person who's got the ability but hasn't really got support to get his product into a national thing.
Thanks, Brad. Bandla, your response?
Yeah, Brad and Dave, you're spot on. Where our challenge is, and in what Brad is raising, is that government, for example, now we're doing local elections. So there are some fat cats who are obviously financing our parties. These people then are buying basically to have those tenders awarded to them for the shoemaking. Because if then government is rolling out BEE, is writing that law, legislation, whatever it is, in support of the township economy or informal economy or whatever you want to call it, then by example, our very government should be leading. Where's education residing? It's residing with government. Where are most of the people where's public works residing? With government. So those are tools accessible to government to implement legislation and policy. But because the very parties who are now going through an exercise as we speak are lobbied, those people who are going to get those tenders are those people who supported them for their campaigns. So the very government then is not able to deliver on its promise per se, because it has to deliver on the promise of the person who paid for the T-shirts and the advertising and you name it, and lining their pockets. So I think we need to then have an agenda which is readdressing that difficulty within not just the ruling party, but the parties that even on a coalition basis drive the right agenda, not the agenda of talk per se, but also, let's say, we have these tools within government, like you said, Brad, and like you said, David. How do you use the very same nature of an education system to uplift our people, those who are in shoemaking, for argument's sake, uniform, which is wholesale and retail? So some of our people are involved with that.
Yeah,
So
Brad,
Banda-
you want to?
So Banda is very interesting because my whole focus is getting corporate support of the small business. I don't even touch on government because that's a whole another story. But you're quite right. And actually, it starts with the people on the ground. Someone like Saita should insist that no matter who wins the election, if they're putting out a contract for school shoes, not a problem. But what you can't have is you can't have Brad and Dave setting up a company 51% owned by Dave, and then we get the contract and we give it to some fat cat shoemaker. That's not going to fix South Africa. So we should not we, but Saita, someone with power, should not allow it, no matter who wins the election. So then it's clear. By all means, donate the T-shirts, do your thing, but please understand that if tenders are issued, there is very strict law, punishable by proper sentences, that will ensure that the actual contract goes to the ground, and there are ways you could do that. So you're right, the political will might be lacking. But someone like Saita that's got the power of the informal sector and numbers behind them, and I would imagine associations with trade unions, they should be insisting that that can't be. It cannot be that that shoe contract went to Brad and Dave and we took our money and gave it on anyway to barter shoes.
Yeah.
I'm coming in on this, Brad, that you are spot on, because I'm not pro-apartheid, but I'm just making an example. In apartheid times, if you, as anyone outside of the township, came to do business in the township, then it was a law that 51% is owned by the people of the township. Whoever's coming in, for example, Sam Tundubel was with breweries. Sam, in their time, those guys that formed FAPCOS, they had 51%. Anyone coming to the township, whether it be South African breweries, whether it be any of the winemakers at the time, because they were an association for your, what do you call the stuff, your nightclubs and what do you call smoker laser? I'm not getting the right word now. Shebeens, Shebeen owners. So those people rallied themselves into an organization, which then, if you wanted to partner with Picardy, if Picardy wanted to partner with them on distribution and supply chain, 51% was owned by the people in the township. Picardy would have to settle with 49%. And that was a law in apartheid. That law has since gone. I saw now 2 years ago, Johannesburg was applying for that law to be reinstated. And I don't know how far it went, but that's a type of law that you are alluding to, that we should be having, that will change things so that it empowers the township in its own township economy.
Go ahead, David.
Very good.
You know what? This is such an interesting conversation we are having here, and I'm glad we're not just having one show on it. But when one looks at, let's talk again, the formalization of the informal economy and the role that BBBEE, what those codes play in that particular strategy, and let's not forget is that South Africa is a member state to the R204. So we said we are part of that implementation drive. As Saita, we are now leading that drive for South Africa, because since its inception in 2015, I mean, we look around us, what are we seeing as the informal sector? But saying that, we are very happy to announce that we work very, very well with the various government departments, and there's a big interest and there's big support from government now to want to support and access the informal sector. Again, the main barrier at the time was, how do we access the informal sector? Because it's so fragmented. And again, we're very glad to announce that today, as we sit here, that bridge is there. Saita is that federation through which we can access the informal sector. And the things which at the time seemed almost impossible to implement can be implemented now. So one of the missing components, if one looks at support that's currently given to businesses, if one looks at CEDA and one looks at the business incubators, all the various support from business registration through to setting up your business plan, through to your website, marketing strategies, mentors, all of that, you can look at everything. And you say, well, that's great. That's excellent. But there's one thing missing: procurement. Preferential procurement is missing from this entire system. You know, if we understand what an informal, I think we are business people around this table here. If you understand your business, you understand that to move from informal to formal means that you take on additional expenses. You've got to spend more money to maintain this formal state. And if that state is not supported by procurement or by acquiring new business, all you're going to do is you're going to take your business, you're going to take a bit of a risk to register it, maybe buy some additional equipment, take on a property, or whatever you're thinking is going to happen. But if there's no procurement to support that, you just move back to the informal state. So this discussion, and when we look at BBBEE, creates a channel through which we can drive preferential procurement, which supports the business incubator model, which immediately starts supporting what SEED is doing, what CEF is doing, and many other government institutions. Thank you.
Brad?
So the people that write the codes will tell you, Brad and Dave, you're misinformed. There is preferential procurement part of the code, and they're right. But here's the problem. It's like so many things in the country, it's the delivery on the ground. This is what happens practically. You get a company like Vodacom who decide they want to entertain over the World Cup soccer 100 of their international guests, and they're going to spend the money on procuring lovely township trips, excursions to see South Africa and taking people in to see our mines and wildlife, whatever the case is. And the beautiful thing is, they then spend their money with a travel agent. They write the check out 100 million. The travel agent's owned by Brad Fisher and Dave. Dave owns 51%. Brad owns 49%. We're both rich anyway, but we own the travel agency. And Vodacom says our procurement box is ticked. We gave it to a black business, 51% black owned, that's doing less than 50 million rand turnover. And we give the business to Greyhound. We write the check. We take our money for booking, the 10%, and Greyhound get the flipping 50 million. And there were how many small operators that could have done better than Greyhound and taking guys into the township or onto the game for whatever the case is. So there is procurement. But how can they possibly allow it? They got to get strict on these fronting things because it just kills everything. The codes are actually quite good. A few small changes, and this idea that Dave raised on this 50% or bundle, I never knew that thing. That's very good. I've heard people talking about if you're giving someone a bonus in the township economy, give it to them on a card that has to be spent in the local area only, and it can't. That's great, but I never realized that that's another add-on to the code. But the code has got all the elements. There is preferential procurement and enterprise development for 40 out of 110 points. It's the delivery. They've got to change a few rules. And a company that tries that trick on, it should be punishable. It's a criminal offense. You've kept money out of the mouths of 50 small operators that could have divvied up with that, or 100 with that one contract. So, yeah, sorry, Dave.
Okay, David. I'm not getting a chance to ask a question here this evening. But go ahead, please, David.
Listen, I think it's the first time that you're alone with three men on this platform. So yeah, so you'll have to manage us a bit here.
Yeah.
I just want to support what Brad is saying. Yes, you're right. Preferential procurement, enterprise development, skills development and training. It's written in the code. But let's talk to informal traders and ask them how much of that do they see. That's it. That's right there. Do a survey, and there's your answer right there.
Absolutely right. You know, Louise, I was telling you earlier this thing. Dave's put a proposal, I don't know if I can mention names, but he's put in a proposal to a big bank to back informal waste pickers. Right. Do you know how much money corporate South Africa have to spend on, never mind BEE, on something called SEG, socio-economic, socio-environmental and governance, SEG. 1% of the listed companies on this is a worldwide thing. Companies around the world all have to spend money on sustainable goals. And South Africa's got about 3 sustainable goals that we focused on as a country, which corporates must put 1% into. One of them is socioeconomic upliftment. Another one is the environment. And the third one is governance. Now, this informal proposal that Dave has put together and we put together, potentially, if it reached its full potential, there are 100,000 waste pickers that are on about 80 Rand a day, okay? And who could be on 250 Rand a day if they just got corporates to support them doing recycling. Corporates would get the boxes ticked of the environment, they'd get the boxes ticked of socioeconomic development. You're in media, they'd get the boxes ticked of brilliant PR because suddenly Unilever or Nedbank would be supporting upliftment of the small, and they're doing recycling. They're saving our water, our rivers, and our landfills. So there's an incredible thing. But at the moment, there's very little other than a couple of people that are now waking up because it's such an important thing, the environment. There's very little incentive for a bank to go and, like FNB, put 500 million into this thing over the next 5 years when they can just put it into a fund and get a much easier shot at getting their points ticked. Again, if the codes would change, that more people had to think as small as micro entrepreneurs pulling waste, and you took 100,000 people and you moved them from 80 Rand to 160 Rand a day. How could you do that? Just by putting the place where they have to take their waste to close to where they collect the waste. They can do 2 trips. They can only pull 80 kilos. Right. How do you take them from 160 Rand to 250 Rand? You aggregate them. You can get a better price because now you're pulling they've got more pull. How do you take them from 250 Rand a day to 500 Rand? You invest in pelletizing machines and you sell the pellets, which you can make plastic furniture on. How do you get to some of these people to 1,000 Rand a day? You teach them how to make plastic furniture. How do you get them to 10,000 Rand a day? You teach them how to export the furniture. There's a whole waste beneficiation program that's beautiful that you could roll out over 5 years. You try and see how much today, how much money we've done, the only one in the country that I know of. We've helped 120, and we're a small company relatively. How much money has actually reached the informal waste picker in this country? Nothing. How much relief did they get over COVID? 0. It's just not happening on the ground.
Yeah, I know that's a fact, Brad. I mean, even in the informal sector, relief funding over COVID has been few and far between. Rashida Muller, our president, has just reminded me of a gentleman that we had as a participant on one of these Saita Straight Talk sessions, and he applied for TREP funding. And when he was on here a month ago, he was so excited because that very day he had just received a call to say that his funding was approved. It's a month later. He still hasn't received a cent. And he is now at the verge of losing his little business because he doesn't have any money to fund it. So that's the one scenario. And we're talking about the codes, but there's one thing that I want to ask the three of you, and that is there's 2 questions that I'm sitting with. And the one, it is clear to me that Saita has to be the organization that drives the lobbying for the change in the codes. But is there no responsibility from the corporate sector also? Don't they see this? That they should also be motivating for this to happen? That's the one thing. And then the second thing is, I'm going to give you your chance, Brad. My other question is, and that's about upskilling people, because is that not also the lazy man's excuse to not want to use the smaller guy because of the skill level? So, Brad, you can answer, but the opportunity is also there for the other 2 gentlemen to respond.
Just want to tell you one thing about the corporates and the codes, okay? First of all, there's an organization called Business for South Africa that was set up to support business and the country get through COVID. In Business for South Africa, they represent all of those businesses. Business Leadership South Africa, all of them, they're all part of Business for South Africa. And when COVID started, we said to them, guys, there is no provision, food or otherwise, for the informal sector, the microeconomy, the sole proprietors, nothing. They received 500 million relief, the SASME fund. You can check my facts. That 500 million rand got divvied out in 4 days to 300 businesses, all doing between 10 and 50 million rand turnover. Yes, they saved those 15,000 jobs, or never mind saved, they certainly helped. I'm not pouring cold water on the relief they did. Not 1 cent of that 500 million went to one person running a tuck shop at the school that was closed for 6 weeks, or the guy that had a school taxi business that was closed for 2 months, or the taxi driver, or the waste picker, or the bolt driver, or the car guard. Zero. Nothing. Food relief. When this thing happened, I said to our waste guys at We Help, it's a non-profit thing, what are you going to do now? You're not allowed to work. Oh, they're going to the shelter. Have you got food? No. I phoned Solidarity. Where's the provision for the micro? The waste pickers, car guards, guys at the traffic lights. Brad, sorry, there's nothing. We had to do crowdfunding. We raised 2 million rand. We put together 10,000. We fed 10,000 guys for those 7 weeks. Not 1 cent. The city of Joburg escorted us around, handing out the food packs. Nothing from the city of Joburg, nothing from Business for South Africa, nothing from Solidarity. Zero. So what's going on? Where's all that money that was put, billions, into Solidarity? No one got anything on the ground. And no one's even shouting about this. Saita someone should take the government to, not talking about the money that was stolen. There was no plans. There weren't even plans for the informal sector. Never mind that the money didn't get there. There wasn't even a plan to help these guys. It's not like the waste pickers got a fridge or a bank account. They just were going to run out of food after 3 days. It was unbelievable.
David?
One of the problems, and let's, and please, I talk on different fronts, and I sit in different rooms talking to people. And I want to say that from all of the engagement that we've had with government, there is a drive and a passion to want to make a difference within the informal sector. I can say that confidently. The problem was that there was never a vehicle through which they can implement these things. The questions you always get when you engage is, how do we get to the trader? How do we get the information based on the informality? We need this, we need that. And it was very difficult for government to be able to engage the sector, be it at a national or a provincial level. But now with Saita, that vehicle is there. So I can assure you, I can assure the listeners that in the next couple of months, you are going to be seeing some interesting things happening in our country where the informal sector is related. But coming to big business as well, same thing. There's a passion from big business to want to work with the informal sector and micro enterprises. Why? Because we'll save them money. We all understand there's high quality which you can get. Many of the businesses that servicing big business today are subcontracting their work to the informal traders or to the micro enterprise. Anyway, so big business knows this, but how do they get to that person? That person's not marketing his business or her business. They're not out there. They don't have the profiles. They're not registered on the vendor databases to be accessed. So it's again, how do we get there? And this is exactly what we are working on. As Saita, as Economic Development Forum, we are bridging that gap. We're forming partnerships with various corporate partners. And we're saying, this pool is available. What are you looking for? Talk to us. We'll work. We'll assist. Whatever's missing, what is lacking, let us assist and let us see how we can tick those boxes and fill in those gaps. So I think we are now on the journey of bringing both formal and informal together. And I think what we must be focused on is how do we solve the problem? We know the problem exists, yes, but now I think a lot of our conversation got to be around the solutions and how do we sit around the table such as this and talk about practical solutions which we can, very importantly, not just talk about, but they can be applied and be applied quickly. Our members, our businesses need support. They need it now. We cannot have these discussions for the next year or even 6 months, maybe not even 3 months. A lot of our businesses need that support and they need it now.
Pandla, some final words from you.
I was actually trying to share as we were talking. I was looking for this bill it was actually submitted by the Helen Suzman Foundation. So I've got a document, but I tried to share it on the screen, but I will happily send it to you, Louise, then you can circulate it. It was an application done in 2020, but it speaks to the 51-49% equity split when venturing into township economy or business within the township. So I was going to share that with you guys. On my side, I think Brad and David are spot on in terms of the approach that we need to take. I'm very eager on engaging all the stakeholders, whether it is a bottom-up, top-down approach. And what I mean by that is that, as Brad example illustrated, that government will say, tick box, we've done this, it is within our bill or legislation or whatever. But in terms of the execution, it's where it's lacking. And I had a conversation with someone this week still, and I was saying the trouble we have in this country in particular is that our people do not have the confidence in their own. And let me explain why I say that. We much rather give power to people who came from exile than to believe in ourselves to remedy our own situations. And what that has bred was that those people who are coming back from exile undermine the people in the country, whether those people are of any ethnicity. And those people, because they have been socialized outside of the country from their youth to when they came into power as their in middle age to adults, or rather senior citizens, they then came in and did not make decisions that were pro to their people. So there's less of a confidence, no matter what qualifications I could have, no experience, just because of the color of my skin and that I'm in South Africa, there's lesser confidence in this of mine in application. You much rather than give that confidence for me to partner with a European or and so on. So it is staggered in terms of how confidence is assigned within South Africa. Thus, we have a tender process that says, if you are coming in, whether you're doing development, whether you're doing whatever, you will come in and subcontract. Because lo and behold, there is someone that is preferred to lead. So for example, David knows, when we were trying to build a mall in Khayelitsha, we would have to go and have a so-called experienced, or for argument's sake, we don't have the balance sheet. I'm trying to understand, where was I going to get the balance sheet in 1980 and 1970? So if those arguments are out, then you still have the case that we've been certified, because you either get some form of certification, whether it be in the building or whether it be in IT, whether you got those certifications, but they're not enough. Then you got the formal roof in terms of the NQF qualification framework. You also get that, doesn't help. Because once you have the qualification, you don't have the experience. Once you have the experience, you don't have the qualification. So our people has been thrown back and forth. And the makeup of our constituency, which is the traders, are people who moved out of the workplace to go and do it for themselves. So we need to be in a position to empower them purely on the basic that they weren't privy, they weren't given the opportunity to function at big business level. So we need to create those platforms, which is, an incubator is one of them. Incubation is one of them. There are many others, which Brad also touched on, in terms of why do you then partner from a fronting point of view, people who then make the buck. I'm just taking this thing so I can make 2 million of 200 million. So those are the things that need to be cleaned up in the implementation of our policies or in the policing of those very policies. Yeah, that's my part in short.
So Brad, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to give you. I'm not going to be able to give you a chance to respond to that. I am making you a promise, though, that you can start off the conversation in our next session on Tuesday next week. 58 minutes and 53 seconds. This has officially been the longest Saita Straight Talk session since we launched. And what an amazing show this has been. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me. If you are watching for the first time, please make sure that you like the Saita Media Facebook page. Please make sure that you share tonight's video with as many people as possible. And do join us next week, Tuesday at 7 o'clock, when we'll be continuing with this session. And perhaps we're going to put together exactly how we're going to be lobbying for the BBBEE codes to be changed. Until next time, from me, Louise. Thank you, gents. Goodbye.